Hello everyone, myself Dr. Vinay Gandal from KMC College Khopoli. Today I am going to talk about accounting for hire purchase. Dear student, in this video lecture we will learn about meaning and features of hire purchase system. We have to understand details about hire purchase agreement, various elements of hire purchase system. We have to also learn about how interest is calculated, how depreciation is to be charged, and what is the detailed accounting procedure under hire purchase system. So dear students, first of all, it is necessary for all of us to understand the concept of hire purchase. Okay, so first of all, the question may arise in front of all of us: what is hire purchase and how records is to be maintained in the case of hire purchase system. Okay, so dear students, normally hire purchase is an arrangement for buying expensive consumer goods where the buyer makes an initial down payment and pays the balance plus interest in number of installments. Dear students, for example, in the case of small items like stationery, then some homogeneous goods, these type of goods are normally sold by the traders only against full payment of price in cash. However, in some costly items like vehicle, machinery, land and building and other assets that may be sold on hire purchase basis. So in the case of hire purchase, the buyer pays for an article in periodical installments but becomes the owner of the article only after the final installment is paid. So in the case of hire purchase system, it is normally said that it is the process of buying expensive consumer goods in which the buyer make certain amount of money called as initial payment or down payment and can buy the asset or machinery and can be used such assets and make or agree to pay remaining balance of that machinery, that is cash price, in number of installments with a specific amount of interest. Okay, and this hire purchase system is more applicable to the goods having a high cost or high value. So in the case of costly goods, the persons may use the system which is known as hire purchase system. Okay, so hire purchase system is a system which is more beneficial to the buyer to buy some of the goods having a high cost and that can be used by the buyer when it is purchased, and he is entitled to pay certain amount of money at the time of signing the agreement called as the initial payment or down payment, and remaining amount of that particular goods or machinery is to be paid in number of installments with agreed amount of interest. Okay, so this is the system which is used normally for purchasing expensive goods on installment basis. Okay, now we have to understand some basic features of hire purchase system. So dear students, normally it is said that hire purchase system is governed by Hire Purchase Act 1972. So traders have to follow all the provisions as prescribed in Hire Purchase Act 1972 for recording the transaction of hire purchase system which has been made between two persons, that is hirer and hire vendor. Okay, it is an agreement, it is an written agreement of buying the goods, or it is the agreement which has been made available between two persons, that is called as hirer and hire vendor, about hire purchase system. Third feature, that is, in the case of hire purchase system, the agreement is made between two persons, that is known as hirer and hire vendor. So hirer means the person who purchase the goods. Hirer also called as hire purchaser, and hire vendor is the owner of the goods or who sold the goods to hirer. Okay, so there must be a two person in hire purchase system, that is called as hirer and hire vendor. Okay, fourth feature, that is, terms and condition between the parties are entered and recorded in a document called as hire purchase agreement, and according to the hire purchase agreement, hirer is entitled to pay cash price to the hire vendor in various installments as per the agreed term of hire purchase agreement. Okay, so we have to understand the cash price of asset in the case of hire purchase system. Next feature, that is about title of goods. So in the case of hire purchase system, the title of goods passes on last installment. In short, the ownership of asset is to be transferred to the hire purchaser when last installment has been paid. Okay. Next feature, that is, the hire vendor can take possession of goods if hirer fails to pay. Means hire vendor has a right to get back his goods or asset if hirer fails to pay any amount of installment due. Okay, so these are the a few features of hire purchase system, and we have to understand the detailed procedure of hire purchase system. Okay, so dear students, now we are going to learn about the first concept of hire purchase system, that is called as hire purchase agreement. Okay, so it is the written statement made between hirer and hire vendor about hire purchase transaction. In the case of hire purchase system, a person who acquires an article or goods under hire purchase is known as hire purchaser or hirer, and the owner who gives his article or goods on hire purchase is known as hire vendor, or it is popularly known as vendor. The hirer and the vendor enter into a written agreement as hire purchase agreement, and this agreement consists some content. So we have to understand the contents of hire purchase agreement. Means there are many points which has been expressly mentioned in hire purchase agreement. So we have to understand whatever or what are the points to be considered while preparing hire purchase agreement. Okay, so first content that is called cash price. So dear students, when we talk about hire purchase agreement, it is necessary for us to understand the cash price. Means the description about cash price is to be mentioned in hire purchase agreement. Okay. So in the case of cash price, it is the purchase price payable by hirer to hire vendor if full payment is made immediately. So whatever price of goods which hirer agreed to pay to the hire vendor on the purchase of goods on hire purchase system is called as cash price. Okay. Second content of hire purchase agreement, that is interest, means the description about rate of interest must be mentioned in hire purchase agreement. Normally, hire purchase agreement states the rate of interest charged by the vendor on the unpaid amount. So we have to understand whatever interest to be charged on outstanding balance of cash price if asset purchased on hire purchase system. Okay. Third content, that is called as hire purchase price. This means the total amount payable by the hirer, also known as hire purchase price, made up, or it is the price payable by the hirer to the hire vendor, and which is to be determined by considering total cash price plus total amount of interest payable. So hire purchase price means the price which consists of cash price plus interest, and it is the total price payable by hirer to hire vendor. Fourth concept, that is down payment. So normally in hire purchase system, there is a procedure to make initial amount or minimum amount at the time of signing the agreement to the hire vendor. So down payment is the initial amount payable at the time of signing the agreement. As soon as down payment is made, the hirer gets possession of the goods and can start using of goods immediately. So as earlier I told that ownership of goods or article is transferred when last installment has been paid. But if down payment has been made, the hirer can start use of assets immediately. Okay. So down payment is must, or it is the important content of hire purchase agreement, and that is to be mentioned in the hire purchase agreement which has been made available between these two person, that is hirer and hire vendor, in the case of hire purchase system. Okay. And fifth content of hire purchase agreement is called installment. The agreement indicates the total number of installments in which the balance amount is payable. So normally the balance amount is equal to the hire purchase price less down payment. The agreement contains the details of the amount and due date of each installment. Each installment amount is made up of a part payment towards cash price plus interest. So in the case of hire purchase system, hirer is entitled to pay amount of installment to the hire vendor during the tenure of hire purchase system. So the amount of installment consists of cash price plus interest. So the amount of installment must be mentioned in hire purchase agreement. Okay. Now the another concept of hire purchase system, that is calculation of interest. So dear students, when we purchase any assets or goods on hire purchase system, it is necessary for all of us to understand how to calculate interest. So normally interest is always payable on outstanding balance. Okay, so calculation of interest is an important step of hire purchase system. So normally there are two circumstances in which interest is to be calculated and is to be recorded in the books of account. So first circumstances, that is calculation of interest when cash price, rate of interest and the amount of installment are given. So we have to use a detailed procedure of calculation of interest in the first case, that is when cash price, rate of interest and amount of installment is given. Okay, and second circumstances is when the cash price and amount of installment are given but rate of interest is not given. So there should be a proper calculation of interest on hire purchase system and properly it should be recorded in the books of account. Okay. Next concept of hire purchase system, that is calculation of depreciation. So as you know that depreciation is the residual value of assets by physical wear and tear. So normally depreciation is to be calculated properly and is to be charged on the asset at the time of year end in each year. Okay, so we have to follow two methods of calculation of depreciation, that is straight line method or diminishing balance method. So whatever method which is applicable and as per the company's policy, that is to be used for calculation of amount of depreciation and is to be recorded in the books of accounts properly. Okay, so any of the methods, any one of the methods we can use and depreciation is to be recorded in the books of account. So selection of methods of depreciation is based on policy of company. So normally in hire purchase system, depreciation is always calculated at a rate prescribed and on the value of asset and is to be charged at the time of year end in each year. Okay. Then we are going to learn about various accounts to be prepared in the case of hire purchase system. So dear students, it is necessary for all of us to understand accounts to be open in the books of hirer and hire vendor. So first of all, we have to understand the books of accounts to be open in the case of hire purchaser, that is hire vendor. So we have to open machinery account, hire vendor account, depreciation account, interest account and profit and loss account, if any, in the books of hirer or hire purchaser. Normally machinery account is to be prepared to record the transaction taken place about purchase of machinery and recording the amount of depreciation to be charged in each year. Okay, so normally we have to prepare depreciation account, machinery account for each year and we have to close the accounts and transferred closing balance of that machinery in next day or next year, and yearly machinery account is to be prepared in the case of hire purchase system. Okay, hire vendor account is to be prepared to record the transaction taken place between hirer and hire vendor, that is uh, amount of installment due, amount of interest due, or installment paid is to be recorded in the books properly. Then the hirer also prepare depreciation account, interest account, profit and loss account, and should be closed at the end of each year, and balance is to be transferred to the next year. So these are the various accounts, if any, are to be prepared by the hire purchaser to record detailed transactions about hire purchase system. Okay. Then books of accounts to be prepared in the books of hire vendor. So in the case of hire purchase system, the hire vendor also prepare hirer account, that is hire purchaser's account, and interest account as well as profit and loss account to record relevant transaction taken place on hire purchase system. So dear students, these are the accounts to be prepared in the books of hirer as well as hire vendor. Okay. Now we have to learn various accounting entries on hire purchase system. So dear students, for making the ledger accounts and preparing the detailed accounting procedure, we must understand various accounting entries. So first of all, we have to learn accounting entries in the books of hire purchaser, that is called as hirer. Okay. So first transaction normally taken place between hire purchaser and hire vendor, that is purchase of assets. So in the case of transferring the possession of goods, we have to pass entry to record in the books of account. In the books of hire purchaser, entry will be asset account debit to hire vendor account. Okay. Second transaction, that is making of down payment. If hire purchaser made an initial payment as a down payment to hire vendor, so we have to record entry for that, like hire vendor account debit to cash or bank account. Okay. And third transaction, normally hire purchaser need to record in his books, that is interest due on installment. So whatever interest due means, before making the payment of installment, we have to calculate amount of interest at a rate prescribed in the hire purchase agreement, and entry for interest due is to be recorded in the books of account, like interest account debit to hire vendor account. And once interest due is to be recorded in the books of account, then we have to record the accounting entry for installment paid. So if amount of installment paid by the hire purchaser to hire vendor, it is to be recorded in the books by preparing the entry, like hire vendor account debit to bank account. Okay. And fifth transaction about charging of depreciation. So hire purchaser need to charge or calculate depreciation in each year, and it is to be recorded on the credit side of machinery account by preparing the entry, like depreciation account debit to asset account. Okay. And sixth transaction is for closing of depreciation account. So dear students, in the case of hire purchase system, we have to prepare ledger accounts, year wise ledger account. So for example, in the first year, we have to made all the entries and we need to close the account. So while closing the depreciation account, we have to transfer the amount of depreciation to profit and loss account by preparing accounting entry like profit and loss account debit to depreciation account. Okay. And seventh, last transaction, that is closing of interest account. So whatever amount of interest is there at the end of accounting year, the balance of interest account is to be transferred to profit and loss account by preparing the accounting entry like profit and loss account debit to interest account. Okay. So dear students, these are the accounting entries which are we have to record in the books of hire purchaser. But keep it in your mind, except accounting entry number first, another and second, the entry for interest due, installment paid, charging of depreciation, closing of depre and interest accounts are to be prepared in each year. So we have to record all these transactions repetitive in nature in each year. Okay. Then we have to learn accounting entries to be passed in the books of hire vendor. So normally, as earlier I told that in the books of hire vendor, we have to prepare hire purchaser account, interest account and profit and loss account. Okay. So for recording all the transaction made between these two persons, hire vendor also prepare ledger accounts by passing various accounting entries. Okay. So first transaction means on transferring the possession of goods, hire vendor record the transaction by passing the entry like hire account debit to sales account. Okay. And second transaction, that is on receiving down payment from the hirer, the entry will be passed like bank account debit to hirer account. Okay. Third transaction about interest due on installment. So whatever amount of interest is calculated or is due, that is to be recorded in the books of hire vendor by passing the entry like hire account debit to interest account. And next transaction, that is about amount of installment received from hire purchaser. So this amount of installment paid is to be recorded in the books of account of hire vendor by preparing the entry like bank account debit to hirer account. Okay. Then charging of depreciation. Dear students, keep it in your mind, in the case of hire vendor, no entry is to be recorded for charging depreciation, because in the case of hire purchase system, depreciation is to be charged by hire purchaser, not hire vendor. And same, there is no entry is to be made in the books of account for closing of depreciation account. Means depreciation account is not prepared in the books of hire vendor. Okay. And last entry, that is for closing of interest account. So whatever amount of interest balance is there at the year end, that is to be transferred to profit and loss account by preparing the entry like interest account debit to profit and loss account. Okay. So dear students, these are the various accounting entries we have to pass while recording the transactions on hire purchase system in the books of hire purchaser as well as hire vendor. Okay. If you are having any questions in relation to these, you can ask or comment. Thank you.